Now, even though the round finished a day later this week, the AFL Round 7 results and reaction is still coming to you very, very early. Now, there's a lot to discuss. Obviously, the wins and loss record is at an all-time high for me at the moment. Let's see if I can extend it even further. It's been a great week of football, and let's discuss it all right here. Let's do it. What's up, everybody? It's the Aidan Sports Show and welcome back to another video. This is going to be an AFL Round 7 match reaction and results, where I give you all the results for all of the AFL in Round 7. I give my reactions to the games and I also give my wins and loss record. How many games I predicted right, how many games I predicted that were wrong. At the bottom corner of the screen, you will see the win-loss record as soon as we get started. But before we do that, please like and subscribe to the Aidan Sports Show YouTube channel. Turn notifications on and let me know if your team was a winner this week. Where do you rank on the ladder and how close do you think your team is to making the top 8 or potentially the premiership, depending on which team you go for. I'd love to know your guys' opinions. And in the end, the AFL is so diverse, it's so unpredictable. There are so many games where people just don't know where to go. And it's honestly one of the most entertaining sports in the world because of that. But without further ado, let's get into the very first game, which was a Thursday night game between Collingwood and Geelong. Now, I thought this game was fairly good. Again, scoring-wise, wasn't the greatest type of games. Collingwood won 57-35, and that's the first win on the board for me, as I predicted Collingwood to win. This game was relatively tough. Again, you see Geelong in most of these games perform spectacularly in some games and shocking in the other. I thought Collingwood was a dominant factor here, and the scoreboard in itself, it shows a decent scoreline for both these teams. It means that both these teams played fairly well. But again, you'd like to see more scoring out of these two teams. Two attacking teams, to be said. Collingwood has a better defense, and I think it's probably why they won the game. But nevertheless, these two teams are very attacking, and they should display that attacking power. And I think 57-35 is not that great for either teams. But I think it was a good game. And in the end, for anybody that likes Collingwood, that's a very good win to have under your belt against Geelong, especially after last week as well when you got the win. So there you go. It's a good win to have at any given time, man. It's a great, great win. And that's the first one on the board for me. Next up, Essendon versus the Western Bulldogs. So we have a tough loss to take here. I predicted Essendon to win, and Essendon did not win. They got destroyed by the Western Bulldogs. Now, in hindsight, I probably should have picked the Western Bulldogs. I feel like every single time they verse Essendon, Western Bulldogs ends up thumping them, and this has been no different here. So I apologize for Bulldogs fans. I probably should have picked Western Bulldogs, but in the end, life happens in mysterious ways, and this one did not work out for me. Now, I only picked Essendon because of the great form they were in last week, and Bulldogs were not in that great form. So in the end, I thought Essendon would probably have a shoe-in to win the game, and I still think they were favourites going into the game. But unfortunately, favourites doesn't necessarily mean that you get the victory, and Western Bulldogs proved that in a very, very, very important, dominant victory as well, getting the percentage back that they lost against Carlton. Very good victory for them. And again, hopefully they can carry that momentum into the next round, which honestly I think they can definitely do. And we're going to have to wait and see how things go based on that. Next up, GWS Giants versus the Brisbane Lions. And once again, when all seems like it's predictable and the Giants should win this game, unfortunately, due to a great performance from Brisbane, the scoreline was 68-88 Brisbane's favour, and that's another loss for me because I predicted the Giants to win. Now, the Giants, you can kind of give them stick for losing at home. It was at Giants Stadium, I believe, so losing at home is not the best scenario for them. They need to win games when they're in their home turf. Traveling has become a big issue for all these AFL teams that travel more likely to every 2 weeks. They're going to have to be traveling, so it's very, very tough for these players. And the one thing that you need to guarantee is that when you're in your home stadium, you need to win. And GWS did not do that. So in the end, this is a bad loss for them. But Brisbane were fantastic. Brisbane were absolutely fantastic. They went over to an opposition home ground, even if there's barely any fans. they did the job. They did the job they needed to do, and that's a great win for them. And now going into the next week, round 8, it's gonna be a very good momentum carryover for a great team like Brisbane, and it's going to keep on going for them. I still see them being very, very, very good this season, and they've shown it by beating a quality side in the Giants. Next up, Sydney versus Gold Coast. Now, there's the winnings are starting to come back because I predicted Gold Coast to win and they won 92-60. Now, I said in the preview, it's always tough to go to the SCG and win, but the fact that Sydney have not won a game at the SCG, I believe that's true, is a very, very big indicator of how the quality that the Sydney Swans have. It just hasn't been great for them so far, and I don't think it's going to get any better for them. Gold Coast, on the other hand, they've had a few injuries, but they still won a game they needed to win, and they are a very young team, so you can see an injury can definitely affect them. But when a team like Sydney Swans comes around, this is your only chance, especially when it's a one team every game season. You're not versing 2 teams twice, so it's going to be very difficult for a lot of teams to get an advantage, and Gold Coast don't have an advantage. So when the games come around, they need to beat the teams that they shouldn't be losing to. So fair play to Gold Coast on achieving that. Again, young teams can always seem to stumble and fall. Gold Coast have not fallen just yet. Yes, they've lost they've lost games. The game to Melbourne is one they probably shouldn't have lost, but they lost. They've lost to Geelong. So in spite of that, they've come back and recovered and retaliated with a very good victory against the Sydney Swans, which is good for them, and I'm very, very proud of that victory. Next up, Richmond Tigers versus the North Melbourne Kangaroos. North Melbourne. I don't know. It's like a fall from grace. I am starting to retract that statement that you have fight, because according to this scoreline, by the way, I predicted Richmond to win, and they did win very comfortably. The scoreline was 77-23. You expect North Melbourne to do a lot better than what they did, especially on the Richmond side, where I heard that 6 players that would usually be in that starting team was not there. So that's 6 players. That's basically half the team, a little bit less than half the team. You've got a lot of work to do to lose that game by that much. You must have been extremely lazy. You must have not done anything, man. It's dominated. But the worst thing about this was that they had 11 behinds to only 2 goals. Now that is just absolutely not good enough for an AFL team. If you look at Richmond, they had 11 and 11. So either way, they were still going to win this game very, very comfortably. They had more shots on goals, and they had the same amount of points as North Melbourne, where North Melbourne only had 2 goals and 11 behinds. That's just not good enough for an AFL team. That's wooden spoon type of play right there. So North Melbourne, now next week is your time to capitalize and retaliate. You got Carlton next week, I believe, and that's not going to be an easy game for you either. But surely you need to put up a better performance than this. I'm stunned. I'm absolutely stunned that you only scored 23 in a game. And I can't believe it. I genuinely can't believe it. But it's not all over for North Melbourne just yet, but it's looking very bleak, and their season doesn't look like it's going to get very far. So I just hope for North Melbourne fans' sake that they can switch it around and provide a quality of football where even if you lose, people are going to enjoy watching your games, because that did not look like a very good game to watch. Going into the next game, which was a heartthrob, stealing performance, and in my opinion was by far the game of the round. Port Adelaide versus Carlton. This game was sensational, and it went down to the wire. I hear 2 different sides of this conversation when you look on social media. But before we go into that, the game I predicted was Port Adelaide to win very, very closely. And I guess I was right on the money, because Port Adelaide defeated Carlton 64-61 by a last siren goal. After the siren, a Port Adelaide player kicked it from a very, very tough angle, and he scored the goal to win the game. And the celebrations were crazy. Carlton fans shattered, and in the end, Port Adelaide get yet another victory to add to their belt as they try to climb to get top 4 and the first on the ladder for the end of the season. Now, let's talk about what the fans think about this game, because that's my top priority here. So, I have seen two sides of this story. The first side is the umpires were not great for either team, but especially Carlton fans are having a big issue with how the refereeing was. Now, I didn't really watch the game at first. I had to go back and watch it, but I can see that side. Now, you expect at least two of the goals that they scored within that last 2 minutes that Carlton probably should have got a free kick before the two goals that actually led them to have a chance, Port Adelaide. But I've also heard another side, which that Port Adelaide should have won this game well, comfortably in the fourth quarter. Apparently, Carlton played very badly that fourth quarter, and Port Adelaide should have scored at least 5 goals. So I hear two sides of that story. But in the end, when all argumenting aside, when all of the umpiring is poor and Port Adelaide should have won well before that, no matter what you guys think, in the end, the scoreline and the actual game itself reflects a fantastic game. And for Carlton fans, I don't feel you should be too angry. Yes, I know it was this close. It was in your grasp. You wanted that win, but there's still a message to be implied here with this loss. Carlton are not a bad team anymore. That's the message here. They're not a bad team anymore. They have risen to a team that's respectable, risen to a team that's competitive, and risen to a team that can get victories against any opposition. That was first on the ladder that you versed, Carlton, and you nearly beat them, and you probably should have beat them. But in the end, that's a big message, man. Don't take your frustrations out. Just think of the positive of that performance, even in a loss. Like, that is a game where many people ruled you out like that. A lot of people predicted a thrashing in this game. And just because I didn't predict a thrashing doesn't mean that I'm right. But I'm just saying that Carlton don't have anything to be ashamed of in their performance. Yes, it's a loss. It's a loss that could be costly for them, but it's not the end of the world. It was a great performance that they showed, and a victory in the end for Port Adelaide. But in the end, Carlton do have something to be proud about for that game. So, Carlton fans, in the end, it's not the result you wanted, but it's the performance you probably wanted. And I hope down the line you can see that your team has improved dramatically. I just know the feeling. I know the feeling of being so close to improving and then falling down. So I hope that doesn't happen to Carlton, because in the end, it's happened to Melbourne on multiple occasions. Speaking of Melbourne, the next game was Melbourne versus Hawthorn. Now, this was in the predictions video, this was a team and this was a game where I didn't know which way to go, because I knew Hawthorn were terrible last week against Collingwood. I scored the lowest score, I believe, in that entire round. But Melbourne was decent against Gold Coast, but we all knew that wasn't a very good side. It wasn't a side that we should say that we're back and we're ready to go. But this game was an absolute belting, and it was on Melbourne's side. Now, since I'm a Melbourne fan and I didn't know which way to go, I picked my team and I backed my team. I picked Melbourne to win the game, and they won the game. So that's probably the most proudest win that I have. But in all honesty, Hawthorn made us look so much better than what we are. And that's just honesty. But you cannot take that victory away from Melbourne, because we were dominant. We dominated defensively. Defensively was a big improvement. Hawthorn did not, until the second half, especially in the fourth quarter, Hawthorn did not have a sniff at the ball. As soon as they got the ball in our forward line, they could not get rid of it. Even from a long ball, a short kick, nothing was working for Hawthorn. And that's because Melbourne's pressure was absolutely immense. Probably the best pressure I've seen, forward line pressure, in a very long time from an AFL team. It was tremendous the way that we played forward line wise. Wiedemann has made a very big impact on this team, actually having a player that knows its positioning, knows where to go in certain areas. He's a decent mark at the ball, and he's a fairly decent kick, even though he did miss a few chances. Hawthorn, I think the scoreline honestly makes you look better than what you were, to be honest. 48-91 was the score, but I don't think, if you really think about it, I don't think Hawthorn deserved to get those 48 points. I think Melbourne dropped off in the second half, and they ended up having a slight sniff at the game, but then Melbourne took care of things in the end. So, look, in the end, it wasn't a good performance from Hawthorn, and now you start to question, after two very bad performances 2 weeks straight, what's the future of this side this season? Is there still a chance for them to do something? Because that's not a great performance, man. You have to look at that and think, why is that happening to Hawthorn? What's wrong with Hawthorn? Again, a good side that's not performing. I hate those. But it is what it is. I guess Melbourne were better on the night, and fantastic. Congratulations to Melbourne. No one can take that win away from you. Thoroughly deserved. And again, I'm most proud of that victory because I didn't even know, but I backed my team and it worked out for me. Next up, the Battle of Perth. Fremantle versus the West Coast Eagles. Now, I don't think anybody picked Fremantle in this game, and that was the right decision because West Coast won this game 62-32, and that's another victory for me. I'm on fire at the moment. I thought this game was... I'm looking at it now, and I just think it was basic stuff. I think just by looking at it, you could tell that Fremantle really tried, because 30 points is not a bad score to lose to, especially when the level of the teams are that close. But 62-32 it's decent for Fremantle at least. And West Coast doing what they're supposed to do, which is what I said. As long as I don't really care what the scoreline was for this game. As long as West Coast beats Fremantle, then I kind of think they're making progression in the season, because they've lost the teams they shouldn't lose to. And they're trying to rectify that by beating teams they need to beat now. And they beat Fremantle, and it looks like they beat them fairly comfortably. So in the end, that's the situation that happened, and I feel good that West Coast won the game. It makes it feel like it's the right result, and yeah, that's another victory for me. And finally, last but not least, the Saints versus the Crows. Now, I said in the preview that the Crows again is going to have to beat a team, and which team is it going to be? And a lot of people were saying it could be St Kilda, but St Kilda proved everybody that said that wrong, because majority of the people did pick St Kilda, as did I. St Kilda were victors 78-55. What a tremendous performance. I think Adelaide played well as well. You need to give their respect. I definitely don't think they're the losers of the rounds, but in the end, you need to look at the quality of the teams. Like, if eventually Adelaide will win a game, I very much doubt that Adelaide will go through the entire season without winning a game. But St Kilda just wasn't the team. I feel like there's going to be a team out there that they will verse, that they will end up losing to. If the Crows go defeated, they lose every single game, I'm going to be stunned. But congratulations to St Kilda on the victory. And there's the score. I believe it's 7 right and 2 wrong. So thank you to my friend Xqueezy, or Jordan for many of you that know him by his real name. He helped me calculate my overall results for every single AFL round prediction, which is very difficult to do, I must say. I'm very, very proud of him for doing that. So shout out to him. In the end, I am 33-22, excluding this round. So if you add things up now, I should be 40-24 in my match predictions, which I think is a great score, to be honest. Again, AFL is so unpredictable. So when you're going positive and you're going really clear of what the AFL should be, I think that's very impressive. It's not the greatest. I know a lot of people betting that actually barely got under 10 wrong, which is ridiculous, man. I can't believe that. But I feel like the more that I get intertwined into the AFL, making these videos and learning a little bit more about each team week by week, the better I'll become at this. But honestly, I don't think 40-24 is that bad of a score. So I'm very, very happy with that. Let's go to the winners and the losers of the week. So the first thing I want to do is describe the winner of the week. And the winner of the week has to be Port Adelaide, because as much as I want to give it to Melbourne, because that's my team, Port Adelaide had a thriller of a game that ended up with an after-siren goal. You don't see many of those out there. You don't see many games that come to that conclusion, that finale, a fantastic finish, AFL showing the last 2 minutes of the game to the entire world. You don't get much better than that in AFL football. And I know Melbourne probably deserve it more. Maybe Gold Coast deserves it more. But Port Adelaide and the way that it ended is absolutely the way to go for this one. So unfortunately for those two teams, maybe even West Coast deserve it. A bunch of teams do deserve it, but unfortunately for all those teams, this is Port Adelaide's night, Port Adelaide's week. They are the winners of the week. They are the team of the week. Going into the worst team of the week, or the losers of the week, I've picked North Melbourne. This one was fairly straightforward. I don't need to go really into detail with that. 11 behinds and 2 goals is unacceptable. By far, probably the worst performance I've seen in the AFL so far. They need to do a lot better than that. And Richmond, especially a team that doesn't have their full squad with them, you don't expect to lose by that much to a team. I'm sorry, 77-23 is a terrible score, but 2 goals and 11 behinds is absolutely dreadful. Considering Richmond had 11 goals and 11 behinds as well. Completely outdone. They deserve the losers of the week. And here is the ladder now. So, as you can see, where does your team stand on the ladder? It's getting really interesting now because we're starting to see the true runners for the premiership so far. And we're starting to see teams kind of who were having great success dwindle out. It's going to be interesting to see. It's definitely not over by far. I think there's a bunch of teams where all they takes is one win and everybody else loses. They'll pop right into the 8. So the 8 is still very, very, very competitive at the moment. But you start to see, especially in the top 4, there's teams there that truly deserve to be there and they're probably going to stay there. So let me know what you guys think. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe if you're new to the Aidan Sports Show YouTube channel. Turn notifications on. Let me know in the comments again if your team won, where you are on the ladder, what do you think about next week. I will give my AFL match predictions on Wednesday for all Australians, and hopefully you guys stay tuned for that one. It's going to be very interesting. I feel like round 8 of the AFL is very, very predictable, to be honest. And I'm going to go and hopefully my predictability will prove me right. Have a wonderful and safe day. Take care and peace.